and my daddy was black, and his daddy was black. So, Mr. Officer, no, I can't help that. Won't you look at the facts? Tell me who's in charge. By the look on your face, the rules differ with ours. Rather see us in cars, wasting money at bars, filling lumps of cigars, living under the bar. But distract us with lights, make me feel like a star. If I spend it today, then no hope for tomorrow. It's the system we live, got me panicked to piss. Still taking my shot, what if I don't miss? Can't live life like this, man, there's gotta be more. Yesterday I was drowning, now I'm climbing the shore. With this mic I grip, till the beats in the morgue. Got the world on my chest, but I'm only a George. Devil telling me stress, so I pray to the Lord. They think life is a game, well don't play on my board. No, 10, no, 4. Chin up, hold your head high. We all did dirt just to get by. We all did dirt just to get by. We all did dirt just to get by. Chin up, hold your head high. We all did dirt just to get by. We all did dirt just to get by. We all did. And my mama was black, and her mama was black. She got an army, in fact. That's my family, my pack. We spread over the map, but Lord knows where we at. Like a trick of a hat, I keep pulling these words, and I know that they feeling me. I keep pulling these nerves. They follow while I'm shopping, man, this king got me cursed. You would think that's the worst, but it follows his birth. I've been stuck on reverse, I just wanna be first, hoping everything lasts. Running from defeat with my feet on the path. Niggas want beef till we meet on the path. Got me on a days, it's been weeks on the path. I just keep walking with the world on my back. Quarter pound of Mary just to make me relax. I don't roll them dice, life is more than just craps. Jay-Z said they hate me cause I'm young and I'm black. Don't know where I'm headed, I'm designing the map. Chin up, hold your head high. We all did dirt just to get by. We all did dirt just to get by. We all did.
What's up, guys? Doug here with Greater Than Addiction Foundation. This is our podcast, The Social Media Experiment. Today, oh, my screen's not playing. 1 second, guys. I want you guys to see my website. So today we have a very, very important guest. She's a retired federal judge. Her name is Mary Beth O'Connor. She wrote the book From Junkie to Judge. She started out shooting meth and ended up going to law school and became a federal judge. I'm going to post all her links in her social medias in this video description, so go ahead and check that out. Go ahead and buy her book. It's an incredible story. So yeah, before we jump into the conversation, just wanted to show the website and what we got going on here. Go ahead and visit on your own time, greaterthanaddiction.org. If you would like to enroll in our free case management services, you just go right up to pages, go to intake form, and you fill out our intake form. And then we get to work for you. We start filling out information to our partners, and we start looking and we help you. Sorry, I don't really know what else to say. It's our intake form. So yeah, let's go ahead and check out Mary. She reached out to me on Twitter. This is her Twitter. Go ahead and give her a follow, guys. She's a really, really nice lady. And we're going to get to meet her right now. All right. Enjoy, guys. All right. So the first question, can you share some insights into the current landscape of addiction and recovery in your state? And what unique challenges the state faces in this regard?
Yeah, so I'm on the board for Life Range Secular Recovery and She Recovers Foundation. I'm actually also on the advisory council for the Higher Calling Foundation. And so because with the book and with I do a lot of speaking, I do workshops and conferences. I actually train lawyers and judges. And so I really try to keep up with what's going on in the recovery community and also the science about substance use disorder and recovery, which has changed a lot. I mean, I didn't get sober until I was 32. I used meth until I was 32, but I'm going to have 30 years in January. And in those 30 years, a lot has changed about the recovery landscape. I mean, for example, when I was in rehab, what they taught us was that we didn't know what day it was, but one day we crossed this invisible line from drug addict from drug abuser to drug addict, which was the terminology at the time. And now we don't talk about it like that. So today we really think of substance use disorder as a mental health condition, which it is. It's a brain disorder. It's in the DSM, the Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual, and it's talked about as on a spectrum of mild, moderate, or severe, right? And so it's just like other mental health conditions. You can have anxiety at the mild, moderate, or severe level, or you can have bipolar disorder, mild, moderate, or severe. And so part of what's changed when we talk about the landscape of recovery is thinking about early intervention instead of waiting for some horrible bottom that need people don't ever get better until they have this very vicious bottom. It just isn't true. But also it's a lot better if people intervene early. If you can disrupt your substance use disorder at the mild or moderate level, you're going to be better off. But it also can impact treatment decisions. Where do you fall on that spectrum can impact, well, do you actually need inpatient treatment? Because not everybody does. And not everybody can afford it or find it, even if it would be beneficial. Or are other options going to be okay for you? Intensive outpatient or working with a therapist and a psychiatrist with addiction expertise. So those are some of the sort of the new thinking, the new approaches, factors to consider when we make treatment decisions. And I know in California, one of the big problems, which is national really, is that we don't have enough treatment beds for people who want it. And so even today, people can want treatment and they end up on wait lists, or if they don't have insurance or they don't have cash, they really can't access it. And so those are definitely problems in California as well as nationwide.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Um, One of the big topics that you touched on right there on the landscape of recovery is aftercare. Is
Yes.
aftercare and getting it. So I'll put it this way: I was an addict at a very young age, and I think that's what you were talking about when we can detect these like patterns in people's behaviors at an early age. I was addicted to video games that blossomed into marijuana, that blossomed into alcohol and cocaine, but it was never a problem that I was playing video games as long as I wasn't disrupting my parents, they didn't. And I think that's a really, really good topic right there. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and I will say to that, the reality is that most likely you were using the video games if it was excessive, which I'm inferring from what you said, in a way, because you didn't know how to handle your emotions or you didn't know how to handle some feelings or some dip challenges in your life. And sometimes people ask me, what's the number one thing we could do to reduce the rate of substance use disorder in the US? And the US, by the way, has one of the highest rates of substance use disorder in the world. And the answer that I always give, if we were to do one thing, to me, it's mental health treatment for kids. Because if you could have had your excessive, your tendency to numb out addressed earlier, it might never have progressed to developing an alcohol use disorder. If I would have had my trauma addressed earlier, I might never have developed a substance use disorder, or I would have gotten help sooner, and it wouldn't have been until I was 32 that I was living in that misery. And so those are definitely things that I think about today, is how we can sort of how we can have an earlier diagnosis that there's a problem and earlier help. And like substance use disorder help, mental health treatment in general can be out of people's reach. And that's really setting us up for longer term problems.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and jump to question number two. What are some of the most effective and innovative treatment options available for individuals struggling with addiction in your state?
So today, one of the big changes is that we actually have medication to assist people in recovery for alcohol use disorder and opioid use disorder. And the medication, sometimes they're called MAT, medication assisted treatment. Although, it's really just medicine. It's medicine that reduces cravings and can help people get through, in particular, their early sobriety, although some people need it longer term. But for example, the drugs for opiate use disorder, they will reduce the rate, the overdose death rate by like 60%, and they just increase people's odds of success. And the medication for alcohol use disorder also has strong data that it can be really helpful. So that's they don't have it for stimulants yet, not for cocaine, not for meth, although there are some studies that are going on now that are trying to find drugs that really work for stimulants, and some have promising signs and are even starting to be prescribed off-label. But that can be a real advantage because it can help people get through the early period. I mean, the reality with our recovery is that the more time that we're able to stay off the substance, the more time our brain has to repair, the more time we have to recover. Eventually, the staying sober gets easier. So if people can get through the initial hurdles, that can make their odds of success a lot higher. And then the other thing I'd say is that there's much more recognition about multiple pathways to recovery. And so when I got sober, and this is in 93, my rehab actually told me that there was only one way, and that was the 12-step way, which is, 12-step Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all of the anonymouses.
Yep.
But it wasn't true even then. When I got home, and I always emphasize for the young people, I went to the library because there was no Google, okay? And I found options even then, but there are more today. So I found Women for Sobriety, which is peer support, and they focus on releasing your past and taking control of your life. And I found Rational Recovery, which exists a little, but today is mostly Smart Recovery, which is cognitive behavioral therapy focused. And I found SOS, which exists a little, but today is really Life-Ring Secular Recovery that I'm on the board for. And we have a 3S philosophy: sobriety, secularity, and self-empowerment. And we believe each person's recovery plan is going to be individual to them, because what works for you and what's going to work for me won't be the same. But also that our plan changes over time. As we progress in our recovery, we're going to need to constantly reassess our plan and update it. And then there are other options. I'm on the board for She Recovers Foundation. And She Recovers is for recovery, not just from substances, but also from trauma, mental health, other behavioral disorders like eating or your video excessiveness, and self-harm, sort of everything together. Because most women who have a substance use disorder have one or more of those other areas to work on. And then there's Recovery Dharma, which is Buddhist-based. So there's a lot more options in the peer support world, and there's a lot more understanding in the medical community that there's more than one approach, and that there's no one approach that's going to work for everyone. It's really about an individual assessment. And part of that assessment, and part of what's also changed, is doing a mental health analysis evaluation from the beginning. And so when I got sober, they wouldn't even look at our mental health for like 90 days minimum. They said we had to get the drugs out of our system, but that's not what the evidence shows. And today, if you go in for substance treatment, you should be evaluated for other mental health conditions on day one. And actually, if you go in for mental health treatment, you should be evaluated for a substance problem, because 25% of people with a mental health disorder also have substance use disorder. And about 55 to 75% of the people with a substance use disorder have another mental health disorder too. So today it's called dual diagnosis or co-occurring, and you should be tackling both from the beginning. And so those are some of the areas that have changed since I've been sober and over the last year. Some of the new understandings that the science and research and just people's experience has proven. I will say in California and in many states, one of the challenges is that at one point it was felt that substance use disorder recovery wasn't getting enough sort of governmental dollars, and so they split it off from the mental health system. But now the problem is that when people have co-occurring disorders, sometimes there's not good overlapping care. And so there's a reassessment of how to integrate the care and the treatment for substance use with any other mental health disorder effectively and efficiently and cost effectively. So that's a discussion that's going on around the country.
Yeah, I was actually invited to the state capitol in New Hampshire, Concord, to the New Hampshire Opiate Abatement Trust Fund Committee. And this is a large sum of money that is going to be handed out to
Huh.
recovery centers because New Hampshire sued um, the opiate manufacturers, basically, and they have this large sum of money. But New Hampshire classifies substance abuse disorder and alcohol abuse differently. So people with alcohol abuse cannot get that opiate funding, which I didn't agree with, so I did not go to that meeting, and it just really didn't align with my values. Because what I'm doing here at Greater Than Addiction Foundation is we want to stop addiction. That's the number one word. That psychological component in addiction, and that's what it is. It's all psychological, and it comes in many different forms, obviously. And yeah, I don't know if you
Well,
had a sorry. I don't know if you had a chance to do your research on Greater Than Addiction Foundation, if you got a chance to look at our website and what we're aiming to do. We're aiming to really help people on the computer. We're going to be 100% online. We do free case management, um, and we just help people find, kind of like you said earlier, just the right fit. And we recognize everybody is unique, everybody has different needs. I personally was not a fan of the 12-step program either. I did my recovery right here at my computer, right here at my desk. And the way that that was done was actually kind of a little bit technically illegal. Sorry, Judge. But it's because insurance companies don't like the idea of remote addiction treatment, and I'm really trying to push for reform in that. And yeah.
Well, that is, I mean, that is a couple things I heard, and that is really important. One is that, in particular, for people in rural communities, they often don't have access to in person treatment in their community. And so it's really important that they have access to online services. But also for the peer support groups like LifeBring, we have in person meetings around the country, but we don't have them everywhere. And that would be the same would be true for SMART and Women for Sobriety. And so for that as well, sometimes people will want to participate and they're going to have to do it online because it's not available in their local community. But like you say, you and many people have had successful sobriety by participating in different recovery options online. The main thing is that you find the right fit of what's going to work for you. There are benefits to in person, but it's more important to find what's going to be the right fit, or at least to be able to mix and match. And sometimes, for example, the criminal justice system, when people are ordered to meetings, well, first of all, a lot of times they're not ordered to peer support. They're specifically ordered to 12 steps, and they can get pushback to even ask to be allowed to attend something else. But often they aren't open to online options, and that can really limit people's choices, which isn't really in their favor. And the other thing I heard you say was about alcohol. And I think it is important to really recognize, I mean, alcohol is a drug. Whenever I say drug, I always mean including alcohol. It's just a liquid legal drug, okay, but it's a
Yeah.
drug. And it's still the number one killer in America. Even with the overdose epidemic, alcohol deaths in 2022 were still slightly higher. And I think America underappreciates, the impact of alcohol use disorder, the number of people that struggle, or even the ways that people who aren't really, even if they haven't developed an AUD yet, they're still often using alcohol in a way that's kind of like not in their own best interest. It's interfering with their life goals. It actually has health consequences. Canada is the first country that's recognized now that there is no safe level of alcohol use. And it's their official health policy now. And so alcohol is always important for us to make sure that we're considering it when we're talking about substance use disorder and recovery.
Yep. So I live in New Hampshire, very rural, very blue collar. It's it's amazing. When I started this company and I started digging into a bunch of different topics and poking my head around, it's it was very scary to me that, well, number one, that New Hampshire didn't categorize alcohol as substance abuse, but New Hampshire also makes a lot of money on state liquor sales. Our liquor
Yeah.
is controlled by the state. We have advertisements online for our liquor stores, but we also have the highest consumption rate in America, New Hampshire, highest beer
Oh.
consumption rate in America. And they it's like the big wigs don't understand that addiction is addiction, you know? That's what it is. We have a horrible opiate problem in New Hampshire. Um, and these people are just pumping ads online to for low levels of addiction. And now gambling's illegal in New Hampshire. And it's been a lot to realize and be enlightened into like all these societal issues, that I was never really aware of because I was always just hammered.
I mean, you're right. There are a lot of policy decisions and choices that our federal and state governments and local governments make that impact, the likelihood of somebody developing a problem and definitely their odds of being able to obtain treatment and to recover. And it's important that you're addressing those. I'm really glad to hear that you're aware and that you're doing what you can in your local state because those policy decisions have a ripple effect throughout people's lives, and there's real world consequences to those policy choices that the governments are making.
Yep. Thank you for that. That's really cool to hear from a retired federal judge. So, all right. So, question 3: how can individuals and families in your state navigate the process of seeking and accessing quality addiction treatment services? Are
Oh,
there
yes.
Sorry, there's one more little piece. Are there specific resources or organizations they should be aware of?
And just so the viewers know, we can't see each other, which is why I stepped on you a little bit. I apologize for that. But it's definitely a problem around the country. So unfortunately, there isn't, for example, one place where people can go and get access to quality assessments, right, for treatment facilities. There's usually no consistent standards that are applied, and so it's really hard for people to really be able to evaluate one program against another. The other challenge with that is that when the families are looking, it's often because there's a crisis. And so it's not like they have a lot of time in advance. And so one of the things I do recommend is if that someone knows that their family member is struggling with a substance use disorder, it never hurts to do some research before the person's ready or before there's a crisis, to start looking at what the available, let's say, treatment programs are locally, what's available if you only have a certain insurance, or if you only have, let's say, Affordable Care Act insurance, or if you have no insurance and no money. Doing that research in advance can be helpful so that you're not making a decision like, we've got to decide today, or we've got to decide, within 3 days or something because there's a crisis. But I will also say that if people are looking, SAMHSA, the federal government's mental health and addiction, SAMHSA, mental health addiction services administration, they have on their site, you can put your zip code in and you can get a list of treatment facilities. They aren't vetted really, but at least it gives you a place to start where you can start looking at what some of the options are and going to the websites. The other thing is that I always recommend a couple questions that can be helpful in evaluating. And one of them is going to be, are they open to multiple peer support options? If they're exclusively a 12-step house, which is about 40% still of recovery centers, that can be problematic because they're not even explaining the options to their clients. It's not that I don't think 12 steps will be a right fit for a large percentage. It will be, but you don't know when the person goes in what the right fit's going to be, and they can't make a good evaluation for themselves if they're not told that there are other choices and given information about those other choices. So I would ask about that. The other thing I would ask about is, if your family member has a co-occurring mental health disorder in addition to a substance use disorder, how are they going to tackle that? Are they going to tackle it from the beginning? Are they going to do an evaluation? Do they have a psychiatrist who can work with them? That's an important question. I also think it's important to ask what happens if the client, if your family member or friend has a relapse or recurrence. Are they thrown out? Because a lot of places still do that, and that is the wrong answer. What should happen is that efforts are doubled down, and they really sort of give extra attention to the person. What happened? What's going on? What additional treatment or supports do we need to put in place to try to help them succeed? And so those are some of the things that I talk about as far as looking at treatment options.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you say. It's a lot of information to take in at once. You are a very smart person. I'm really enjoying this dialogue with you because I am learning a lot just listening to you talk. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, look, I feel like now that I've been speaking a lot, it's important for me to really educate myself. I spend about an hour a day reading, the new studies that come out. I get, emails about them, and I read articles and books, and I really try to make sure that I'm informed because I get asked a wide variety of questions. And my goal at this point, because I am a retired, judge, I went to law school in my recovery, 6 years sober. I went to Berkeley Law, and at 20 years sober, after being an attorney, I was appointed a federal administrative law judge, but now I'm retired. And so this is really my time to be of service. And that includes doing my best to share good information that will really help people out.
Well, I think I don't have that many viewers yet, but I think they will all appreciate hopefully this entire podcast. Uh, all right, jumping ahead to the next question. In your opinion, what role does social media play in both perpetuating and combating addiction? What are the specific strategies or campaigns being employed in your state to address this issue?
Yeah, I don't know any specific strategies on social media in California, but I will say that social media, of course, has its pros and cons, right? I mean, think about what happened during COVID. During COVID, some people who were struggling with substances, including alcohol, they found it beneficial to sort of be isolated in a way at home. There were less social pressures to drink or do other drugs, and there was less going out and partying, and they found it helpful, but a larger percentage found it isolating. And alcohol use disorder in particular really shot up during the COVID years, as well as in particular among women. There are actually a large number of women in their 20s and 30s that are now showing up at doctors with liver disease, which is very young to have that. And a lot of it's due to excessive alcohol consumption. There are also groups on social media where you could participate in drinking together, and there was really sort of an encouragement to use it as a stress reliever, which is never, well, look, if you use it once in a great while as a stress reliever, you're okay, but as a regular habit, it's a short-term solution that's actually reducing your odds of dealing with the underlying problem, which is what you need to address if you're going to actually move forward in life. But also there are the positives, as you say. There are for rural communities and for people who want to do something other than 12 steps, the internet and social media offer opportunities, not just to attend meetings, but also to chat and offer support. Like She Recovers, we have a private Facebook group where the women will post how they're feeling or ask for support, or ask, has anyone else done a Suboxone, any concerns, or I'm sober, but now I'm struggling with food. Has anybody else had this experience? And so there can be that supportive environment. But one of the challenges of social media is when people isolate into it and they don't develop other good support networks. It can have an overall negative impact.
Yeah, at Greater Than Addiction Foundation, I actually have a Discord channel which we like to use for just to really get a community.
Right.
I grew up on AIM. It's kind of just like a chat room, and I think it's a very helpful tool for many people. So, um, social media is crazy. It If you use it, like, I ran some ads on TikTok, the insights that you get from TikTok ads is scary. Like you can tell people if they're on an iPhone, you can find out what their interests are, and you can really filter out to really target your audience in a very scary way. And that's why it's kind of in my name, the social media experiment. Just because that's what this is, you know. Who's ever watching this, they're gonna be watching it on some form of social media, and uh, I think I can really harness the tool and create something here. So thanks for being a part of it.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. So actually, we are gonna be ending here in 8 minutes. So I'm gonna just jump to the last question because it's a very important question. I don't have Zoom Pro apparently. It's giving me a warning. Um, so what message or information would you like to convey to the broader community in your state regarding addiction, recovery, and available resources for those in need?
I think one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is the harm reduction approach, right? So harm reduction is basically trying to meet people where they're at and not requiring, not providing resources only if you're willing to commit to abstinence now. And so one of the things I think it's important to mention is I myself, although I have 30 years coming up in January, I used 3 times in my first 5 months, and it is common that people don't have perfect abstinence. But another thing that I use that's now put in the harm reduction boxes, I use the needle exchange. And so basically, because I was shooting meth in San Francisco because of HIV, they had a sort of an off the books tolerated program where we could go and turn in our used needles and get clean needles. And the reason was to reduce sharing of disease, right? Which you can do when you inject with somebody else's needle. And so today they're called syringe services programs, and they not only offer clean supplies, and they do it for smoking as well, but it's an opportunity to interact with a health provider who's really interested in people. And the data shows that people who participate in syringe services programs are actually 3 to 5 times as likely to get into treatment as someone who doesn't. And so it can be about building that relationship and that caring over time, and then waiting for the person to reach the, well, what about treatment? Do you have options for me or help? And having the resources available. The other thing for the general community is I think they need to be aware of Narcan. And so with the overdose death rate explosion, a couple things have changed. One is that it used to be that almost everybody who died of an overdose was a long-term drug user. And now that's not as true. There are many more people that are dying of overdose when they used drug their third time, or they use it twice a month, and it's because fentanyl which is a highly toxic opioid, it's harder to control the quantity, and people don't know what they're taking, if it's in there at all, or even if they know, they don't know how much. And so it's in the heroin supply. There really almost is no more pure heroin supply, but it's also in pills. And so kids can buy what they think is Percocet or Oxy, and it actually has fentanyl in it, and they're dying. And so the number one cause of death in America today in the 18 to 35 age group is now overdose. It's not accidents anymore, it's overdose. Narcan is a opiate reversal drug, and so it's a spray. And if you think someone's having an overdose and you have Narcan and you spray it up their nose, or you can do it twice if needed, it sort of kicks the opioids off the opioid receptors, and they will revive. The other thing is that if they're not actually having an overdose, it doesn't hurt them. And so it's really important to, if you in particular have teens or 20-somethings in your house, to have Narcan there. Because the truth is, you may not know that they're using drugs for the third time, or it could even be their friend who comes over and overdoses. And so that's an important harm reduction tool. Narcan, in about 6 months ago, was made available over the counter. You no longer have to have a prescription. It is about $50. Some insurance will cover it, but there's also community organizations that will give it out. And so those are some pieces of additional general information that we hadn't talked about that I think it's important for people to understand.
Yeah, I actually work with a company. It's called Harbor Care. They're a great company based in Nashua, New Hampshire, and I believe they give out Narcan down on High Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. If anybody watching this needs Narcan, I believe it is free. They hand it out. Um, and shout out to Harbor Care. So
Good job, Barbara Carey. Yeah.
um so yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up here, and I just wanna share my gratitude for this opportunity. Thank you for coming on and sharing some knowledge. And do you have any last words?
I will just say that I do provide a lot of information on my X/Twitter account. It's at Mary Betho _. I don't go there to argue with people, but I will provide articles and science and my recovery thoughts if anyone's interested. I have a lot of other information on my website, which is junkietojudge.com, including some op-eds I've had published like in the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times. And of course, my book, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, which is, by the way, 30, as you know, 30% about recovery. 30% of my book is my first 3 years of recovery. I wanted to sort of lay out what recovery really looks like, how it really operates. It's not an instant quick fix, it's a process. But that's available on Amazon and all the usual sites, and bookstores either have it or can get it. So those are sort of my contact points. Oh, and you can message me through my website, and I always do answer every message. So feel free to message me if I can be of use.
All right. Would you like me to put your links in this video? I'll put it.
That would be fabulous.
All right. So after I end here, I'm gonna do some editing, and this should be up probably in a couple hours if you want to check it out, so you can actually see me, because right now we can't see each other. So this was probably a really awkward interview for you.
No, I mean, sometimes I actually do it on the phone, so it's like that, but it would be nice to see your face. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Your Honor, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the conversation.
No problem. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. So, what you just witnessed was me and Mary's dialogue on very sensitive subjects about addiction. She's from California. She answered those questions according to her state in California. I think that's very important for my viewers to have different perspectives of what's happening in other states, what works in other states, what doesn't work in other states. Um, and yeah, this was a pretty great show. Mary is a very, very smart individual, and I always feel very blessed that I get to hold dialogues with smart people of her magnitude. Um, I'm hoping to continue and keep having guests on the podcast that can really give some good information, some necessary information to the public. Um, if you have not yet, please go to our website, Greater Than Addiction Foundation. Go over here, click Take Action, and donate. You can donate monthly or one time. This $3.44 with my donation, testing to make sure it works. So yeah, please go and check us out. I'm gonna have all of Mary's information and her book. Go ahead and before that before the interview, I actually edited out the first part because she really went into the background of her addiction, and she kind of told me her story, which is really important. But she talks about her story in her book. So if you would like to hear her story, it's incredible. She used to inject meth. Um, and now she's a retired federal judge. She went to law school during recovery. It's just inspiring, and I never thought that I would admit to a federal judge that I accidentally did meth once. That was fucking sorry. Oh, I'm not allowed to swear. All right, thanks, guys.